This last song here is called "In the City," and it's about once again the urban predicament. And I didn't grow up in the city. I grew up in the suburbs of New York. Very much your standard, kind of big public high school, homecoming, all that kind of stuff. And it seemed to me as I was growing up that the rules in my hometown, and really in the American suburbs in general, were, do whatever you got to do, be who you, whatever, do your thing. Just don't be weird. If you're weird, you're really going to bum everybody out. You're going to ruin everything, And I sort of couldn't relate to that so well. And but like it was the 80s. I was a child of the 80s, So like every other kid that I knew at the time, I watched roughly like 22, 23 hours of MTV a day, and I liked it all because there were guys playing music and girls, and I thought that was just great, So I liked, what did we watch? Twisted Sister and Van Halen and Michael Jackson and the Police and Bruce Springsteen doing Born in the USA and all this stuff. And I semi-related to it because they were playing music and I was happy about that. But then they had this weird thing that would come on every once in a while, and you didn't know when, where they had an animated rubber ducky would go across the screen and then it would say, Closet Classics. And then the next thing you know, it would be some dude on a stool with a turtleneck and a medallion around his neck and strobe lights behind him, from the 60s, some clip of some guy that your friends weren't listening to at all. And that was my favorite part of the show, by leaps and bounds, which made me definitely weird in my environs, because there weren't too many kids in the lunchroom talking about that really great Jim Croce record they heard yesterday, whatever. But I was into it, and then, as they always say, you get into that stuff young, it leads to harder things, So next thing you know, I was like way gone on Burt Bacharach and Hal David, and next thing you know it, I'm checking out, Cole Porter and Irving Berlin and really getting messed up on the heavy stuff, but there wasn't anyone to relate to really in my scene that was digging that. Everyone was more into like Duran Duran and stuff. So, but eventually when I was about 12 years old, there was a kid in my junior high school class, it's what they call middle school now, who had a great aunt. His grandmother's sister was still alive, and she was a communist, and she lived in Greenwich Village, and she had like old Soviet Life magazines on her. It's true, on her coffee table. And so we figured out that we could take the train on a Friday and go down to her place and get her the groceries and stuff, and then have the run of the village. I'd never been there before, and I started looking around as I wandered around this area, and they had all the records of all those weird guys from those shows and stuff. They had the old vinyl copies, and that whole 60s vibe was kind of still going. I mean, some of the people were still even there from the 60s, they were a bit hungover or something, but they were still there, and I looked around, and there was the punk rock thing was happening, and and I realized that the rules down there were as follows, do whatever you got to do your thing to the fullest, however you got to do it. Just be weird. If you're weird, then everything's fine, and if you're not, you're going to bum us all out, So I thought, okay, I could do that, So eventually, when I was old enough to choose for myself, I just jumped ship and I stayed down there. And I still live in New York City to this day, and that's where I met Kat and the guys in the band, and I play down there and stuff. But this song is sort of about the inspirational feeling of all that weirdness all around you, which I felt as a kid, and I still do, less so. It's less weird than it was, but I still feel it. And I sort of address that in the song. And, sometimes people sing a song and they send a shout out to somebody. Well, I'm just going to send a shout back. Because I was doing this song a couple of years ago at a folk festival with a band, and they had one of those simultaneous sign language interpreters, one of those guys. And as the song continues, you'll see there's like a litany, like a long chain of rhymes towards the end, and I looked over at the poor guy, and it was his hands were all cramped up. It looked as if his hands had a sore throat, So I send this out to him with my apologies, but I hope you'll enjoy it. It's called "In the City." Takedown without a breakdown, packed the band up, we filled the van up, we had some hours left to kill. I hadn't planned it, but I was stranded in the old hood, up to no good. The clubs were sold out, and it was cold out, and I don't like standing still.